was the last time that you can remember having an entire day without any anxiety? Do you remember it? Well, if it happened, it should have been a marked day on your calendar, because it doesn't happen. Generally, it doesn't happen at all, does it? And that's not too surprising, because Jesus himself said that each day has its own anxiety. So we can expect that. And yet, Jesus also helped us to appreciate that in this world of anxiety in which we live, that we have to be aware of the warning that he gave. And that's why we'd like you to start our discussion here by turning to Luke chapter 21 and verse 34. So you'll notice his warning here when he says, "But pay attention to yourselves." You notice that? Pay attention to yourselves, that your hearts never become weighed down with overeating and heavy drinking, and notice, anxieties of life, and suddenly that day be instantly upon you. So he recognized that there was going to be a need, brothers, and there's a growing need the closer we get to the end of the system to pay attention to what's causing anxiety. Because you'll notice the result is, he said that it can cause our thinking to become clouded and our awareness to be dulled, because it said there that suddenly that day would be instantly upon you. In other words, you'd be distracted, you could be distracted by it, and then all of a sudden, the Jehovah's bringing an end to the system, and the danger is we may not, at that point, be ready. And so, very appropriately, he says, pay attention to yourselves, so that that doesn't happen. And that's why we're going to talk about, for the next little while, brothers, what we can do about our anxieties. Do you know what's causing you anxiety today? Do you know what it is? Can you identify it? You know, it's important that we do that. We have to get it out there in front of ourselves so we can see it, so that we can begin to know what to do with it. However, that doesn't mean that we get it out in front of ourselves like this, because then that's all we see. But we have to get it out in front of us where we can look at it and see it for what it really is. And when we do that, then that painful, apprehensive uneasiness of mind, which is how Webster describes anxiety, can be dealt with in an appropriate way. And the Bible gives us real good advice about that. But before we talk about the advice, do you think that it's desirable to have a life with absolutely no anxiety? Is that desirable? Might sound like it on the surface, but it's not really, because some anxiety is very necessary for us, because anxiety can move us to do things. In fact, if you had absolutely no anxiety, maybe you wouldn't get up in the morning, and you wouldn't get much done throughout the day. So it can be a very positive thing, too. So we don't want to misunderstand that. In fact, there's a good Bible example that we can look at in 2 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 28. And when we look at that for a moment with regards to Paul's example, we'll see that anxiety can actually be a very positive thing if it is, in fact, something that moves us in the right direction. Because in discussing some of the things that caused him anxiety, you notice in verse 28, Paul also went on to say, says, "Besides those things of an external kind, there is what rushes in on me from day to day, the anxiety for all the congregations." Do you think that was a bad thing? To have those anxieties rush in on him with the congregations? Do you realize what that caused him to do? It moved him, first of all, to take up the full-time service. It moved him to travel as a missionary. He set up congregations. He gave himself for the brothers and sisters. Then he was moved to come back to see how they were. He wrote letters like 2 Corinthians to help them to stand firm as Christians. Was that a bad thing? No, absolutely not. You see, some anxiety can move us to do very, very positive things that are necessary. So we want to just make sure we're balanced about that. And what we want to make sure is that we're talking about here the idea of undue anxieties. Undue anxiety that can lead to physical problems, even sometimes depression. That's what we're talking about. And did you know that undue anxieties, actually, those are a thief? They are. Because they can rob us of strength and initiative and can cause us to slow down in the truth. Again, if you want to look at what Jesus said about that in Matthew 13 and verse 22, it's very interesting how he puts it here. Matthew 13 and verse 22. He's using an illustration here, and he says, as for the one sown among the thorns. Now, what's being sown here is the seed of truth, and the thorn really represents different heart conditions. So it's the people. And it says there, as for the one sown among the thorns, this is the one hearing the word, but notice, the anxieties of this system of things and the deceptive power of riches choke the word, and he becomes unfruitful. So you see, anxieties, it says here, can actually cause us to choke the word and be unfruitful. When you think about that, if someone were to grab you by the throat and begin to choke you, what would you be thinking about? Well, I wonder if I should put those tomatoes in the garden yet or not. Do you think they'll freeze? No. The only thing you can think about is getting these hands off your throat. There's nothing else that matters to you at all. And you see, that's what happens, brothers. It says, just as Jesus told us, that the anxieties of the system of things can choke the word. In other words, we can become so focused on our problem that we can't see anything except the anxiety. And then, if that happens, it says then we become unfruitful. In other words, we'll even stop practicing Christianity. But that doesn't happen right away. It just sort of slows down because our concentration is on our anxiety. So that's very serious, isn't it? We can't allow anxieties to choke us. So what does the Bible say to help us to be able to cope with the anxieties we're facing today? Well, there's very good advice found in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 6 and 7. And as we read this, first of all, we'll take note of what the advice is, and then we're going to as well highlight from this scripture there are three things that are noted that are qualities that we have to develop so that we can follow through on the counsel. Now, first of all, let's just notice the counsel. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 6 and 7. It says, humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, while you throw all your anxiety upon him, because he cares for you. So did you notice the counsel? Feeling anxious? Having problems in your life? It says, throw them on Jehovah. There it is. Not so easy to do, though, is it? I mean, what does that mean? How do you throw your anxieties on Jehovah? How do you take something that's driving you crazy and give it to Jehovah? It's very hard to do. And sometimes we're not sure how that could possibly work. But notice now the three qualities that are listed here that will help us to actually accomplish that. Just go back to verse 6. It says there, first of all, to humble yourself. That's one thing that's needed. It says, humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. Due time? Sometime. Some other time. Sometime in the future? What do you call that? Yeah. Patience. Humility. Patience. And then he goes on to say, while you throw all your anxiety upon him, because he cares for you. Can you trust somebody who cares about you? Sure you can. Yeah. So that's the third one. So we have humility, we have patience, and we have trusting in Jehovah. So those are three qualities that are absolutely essential in order for us to learn how to throw our anxiety on Jehovah. So let's talk about them individually. Take as an example humility. Now, is that an easy thing to do? Is it easy to humbly accept direction that Jehovah gives us? Should be. But you know why it isn't? This thing here. Because we decide that, we want something done this way. I got this problem. This is what I want done. And Jehovah's saying, got to do it this way. And we're going, no, I want to do it this way. And Jehovah says, no, you got to do it this way. And so what does it take to be able to say, okay, I better do it this way? Humility. Humbly accepting that Jehovah really does know what he's talking about, and it will turn out best if we do it his way. Now let me give you an example of how that works. Let's take a look at the principle in Hebrews chapter 13, particularly Hebrews 13, verse 5 and 6. He says, let your manner of life be free of the love of money, while you are content with the present things, for he has said, I will by no means leave you, nor by any means forsake you. Okay, so what's the direction? What's he getting at? See, isn't he saying that we have to develop the quality here, we have to use humility to accept that being content with the present things is the way Jehovah wants us to look at things. And that's hard to do. I mean, here in Canada, the world says, they teach you've got to get ahead. You have to, you got to accumulate, you have to acquire, you have to make more money, you have to do more things. But Jehovah doesn't say that. He says, be content. And that's sometimes real hard to do. Whether our brothers live in affluent lands like Canada, or whether they live in very, very poor, economically challenged countries like in Africa and other places, any of our brothers who have taken this counsel and have applied it has made them happier. It's reduced their anxiety. It's strengthened their faith in Jehovah. And they've realized he was right. I want to give you an example right here in our own circuit. Brother has 5 children, but he has a job that causes him to work shift work. And you know what? Over the years, that job was killing him spiritually. Then it was killing his wife physically, because he was hardly ever at home. She had all the responsibilities of the children. She was now experiencing her own emotional problems and having to be head of the house when he wasn't around. And he was realizing that now they were missing meetings. Spiritually, they were suffering. Their personal study program had gone out the window. They were unhappy. And so you remember the district convention last summer? We had the drama. You remember the brother there was under the same sort of predicament. He didn't know what to do. What am I going to do about my job? You say, I haven't got a job, and, well, maybe I should take this one. I know I'm going to miss meetings, but, what am I going to do? And so this brother went to some of the other brothers in the congregation. He said, look, this job's killing me spiritually and my family. What am I going to do? And you know what the brothers said? Don't quit your job. Whatever you do, don't quit your job. And he's going, well, then what am I going to do? Like this job's killing me. But finally, after listening to that program at the district convention, he said, you know what? I'm going to have to do something about changing this job. So he went to his boss, and he said, look, there's a part-time position coming open here. He says, I want that job. Otherwise, I'm quitting. I'm out of here. And his boss says, well, you can't live on part-time work. He says, look, I'm serious. Either I get the job or I'm out of here. So the boss said, okay, you got the job. And you know what? Since that time, he has worked just about full-time hours ever since. Almost now, well, it's 8 months now. And they're doing just fine. And you know what? They're happy. They're back on track spiritually. They're not missing meetings. They all have a big smile on their face. They're paying their bills. And they realize, see, Jehovah said here in Hebrews 13, he said, if we're content, you notice, he said, I will by no means leave you, nor by any means forsake you, so that you may be of good courage and say, Jehovah is my helper. I'll not be afraid. What can man do to me? You see, Jehovah has specifically and directly intervened to help him, and the family recognizes that. He promised them that. And if you just turn over to 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 8, just take note of this. It says there in 1 Timothy 5 and verse 8, "Certainly if anyone does not provide for those who are his own, and especially for those who are members of his household, he has disowned the faith and is worse than a person without faith." So we do have a responsibility to take care of our families, don't we, brothers? But, some went, aha, you see, that's what the Bible says. You see, you can't quit your job. But you remember how the district convention applied this scripture to Jehovah? In that drama, it also said that Jehovah, too, is a father, isn't he? He's a father. And he takes his fatherhood seriously, and that he will take care of his people. Well, that means we don't do reckless things. We don't try to take care of ourselves. But if it's killing us spiritually, brothers, would Jehovah want that? Would he let us suffer? No. But it takes humility, doesn't it? So it's a good example that humbly submitting to Jehovah's direction, making sure that we do things his way, always reaps good results. So the first thing we have to develop, humility. Jehovah does know what he's talking about. Second thing, what was that? And what the second thing was? Yeah, patience. Now let's turn to Lamentations chapter 3 and verse 26. Now Lamentations is a little bit hard to find, so you'll locate it just behind the book of Jeremiah. Lamentations chapter 3. And let's read verse 26 together. Now here's the counsel. It says, "Good it is that one should wait, even silently, for the salvation of Jehovah." Now that's strange, isn't it? Remember, we're talking about anxieties. We got this problem, or problems, and we seem to think that we need them gone. Something's got to be done about these things, and Jehovah says, wait. I mean, how can that benefit us? We want it gone. And Jehovah says, well, just wait. Hang on. Be patient. How can that be good for us? Well, it's really because of the issue, brothers. It's the issue, the challenge that was raised back in the Garden of Eden. You see, Satan never said to Jehovah, you know what, Jehovah? You can't protect those people. You can't put a bubble around them and protect them. You can't do that. Did he say that? No, he didn't say that, did he? He says, you let me at those people, and I'll prove to you that every one of them will curse you to your face. So you see, the anxieties and the pressures and the problems, well, we're proving something, aren't we? You see, if we're willing to be patient, and if we look at things on the broader picture, then we begin to realize that we're doing something very, very powerful by being patient. First of all, we're proving that we love Jehovah. That it doesn't matter what Satan does in this system, we love Jehovah. And we can stand there and go, you're not getting me. I'm not giving in, Satan. And I don't care what you throw at me, I'm not giving up. So we have to have patience. And when we realize that while we're having patience, that we also develop very important qualities. For example, our love for Jehovah is strengthened, and even for our brothers, because we understand what they're going through as well. We develop the quality of endurance. We develop humility. And of course, we broaden our understanding of why these things are happening and how we can help our brothers to deal with that too. And so there are tremendous benefits from that. So we have to develop that quality of humility, realizing that Jehovah is allowing this to take place to prove Satan wrong. Now, something you want to keep in mind with regards to that too, if you just think of Matthew chapter 24 and verse 14, and while you're thinking about that, let's just turn to Luke 21 and verse 11. And we're going to tie these two thoughts together. That's Luke 21 and verse 11. And of course you'll remember in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 14, there it talks about the good news of the kingdom will be preached in all the inhabited earth for a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. So we know that Jehovah has given his people that assignment to preach the good news. Now notice in Luke 21 and verse 11, it says there, and there will be great earthquakes. And notice, and in one place after another, pestilences. What are pestilences? Sickness, isn't it? Disease and sickness. And so, do you think Jesus understood and Jehovah understood that during this period of time when we were asked to preach the good news of the kingdom, that we would also experience illness? Do you think they understood that? Of course they did. Yeah, they knew that. And so because of that, you see, Jehovah will still know that we're going to have to struggle to do this work and to face the problems of illness as well. But here's something that's encouraging about that. If you turn to Psalm 34, just to notice what it tells us here. Psalm 34, verse 18 and 19. Because it really is encouraging if in fact we're facing illness, or will face illness, or maybe it's the problems of aging. You'll notice here in Psalm 34, verse 18 and 19, Jehovah says there that he is near to those that are broken at heart, and those who are crushed in spirit he saves. Many are the calamities of the righteous one, but out of them all, Jehovah delivers them. He doesn't necessarily take it away, but he can deliver us, brothers, in that we can be happy in spite of our illnesses. We can find joy in serving him in spite of that, knowing full well that we're still going to carry on and do his will. And that's kind of interesting, you know, because it helps us to appreciate, especially when we think of our older ones. You know, you start to slow down because of age, and you don't like that very much. I've talked to many of you, and you don't find that a very happy experience. You can't do what you once did. But you know what? It's telling us here that in spite of the fact that you're going to carry on preaching the good news of the kingdom, Jehovah does not expect more of you than you can give. And so we want you to be happy in what you can do, not in what you can't. And Jehovah promises that he'll be with you. So be patient. You see, in time, Jehovah's going to take care of that ailment. He will. No question about that. So the real thing is, then, is for us to remember that it's not that Jehovah asks us to do what we can't do. He just simply asks us to do what we can. So, brothers, make sure you do something in your worship of Jehovah. And if it's your best, in your circumstances, that's all he asks. And that helps us, too, to realize the marvelous God that we worship. So we need humility. We need patience. And what was the third one? Trust. Yeah. So when I think of trusting Jehovah, it always makes me think of the fellow who built his house by the river that was flooding. And as it flooded, he ended up having some guy come by with his car and say, okay, you know, if you get your stuff, you can put it in my car. We'll get you out of here. And he says, I trust Jehovah. And the water kept rising, and he found himself up in the second story of his house, and a guy comes along in a boat. And he says, come on, I'll get you out of here. And he says, it's okay, I trust Jehovah. And then he's on the roof of the house, and the guy comes along with a helicopter, and he throws down the rope, and he says, hang on, I'll get you out of here. Oh, don't worry about me, I'm trusting in Jehovah. And then, you know, the water's right up to his neck. And he says, Jehovah, I don't understand. I put all my trust and confidence in you, and you've let me down. And Jehovah says, well, I don't understand. I sent you a car. I sent you a boat. I sent you a helicopter. What more do you want? And isn't that sometimes how it is with us? Sometimes we want our problems solved our way. We want it done our way. And so Jehovah comes along to fix it, to help us to deal with it. And we're saying, oh, no, you don't understand. I want it done this way. And Jehovah says, this is how you got to do it. I got it here for you. And you know what he provides? Brothers, he gives us the watchtower and the awake. And that has something in there for every problem that we've ever faced as human beings. All we have to do is research it and apply it. And if we have trouble understanding how it applies, what else has he given us? He's given us the elders. We have a whole organization. You have 11 elders in this congregation who understand the Scriptures, who can be of benefit to us. And then we have the whole organization, the teaching arrangement that we have, where we have circuit assemblies and special assembly days, and we have district conventions which we're about to embark upon. And so we say, Jehovah, I want you to fix my problem. And he says, well, I sent you the magazines, I sent you the elders, I sent you the organization. What more do you want? And so we have to be trusting Jehovah that his way works. So, brothers, that means that we have to develop a certain thinking. And what that thinking is, when we have a problem, is what does the society say about that? Every time something happens, we say, well, no, what does the society say about that? You go and research it and get some help to understand how it applies, and we'll be much, much better off. And that proves that we trust Jehovah. So it's important for us to remember that humility is a very important quality, because it moves us to accept Jehovah as being right, and then it causes us to apply it. We want to make sure that we have patience, because, patience actually gives us balance as we're able to think things through clearly, and it shows how we feel about Jehovah. And of course, trusting Jehovah allows us to be happy in our spiritual routine. It helps us to realize that the busier we are in Jehovah's service, really the better off we are. And that's really what Jesus wanted us to be reminded of in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 to 30. Let's just take a look at that. Matthew chapter 11. And so there's an invitation here. Jesus says, come to me, all you who are toiling and loaded down, and I will refresh you. So you notice that? He says, come to me, all you who are toiling or anxious or have problems. Come to me, he says, and I will refresh you. And how will he refresh us? Verse 29 tells us, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am mild-tempered and lowly in heart, and you will find refreshment for your souls. So isn't that interesting? It almost seems like a contradiction, doesn't it? We got anxieties and problems, and Jesus says, well, work for me then. Well, you don't understand. I've already got more than enough to do. No, you work for me. So you put this yoke on, he says, and it will refresh us. Remember what a yoke is? A simple yoke, a bar that would help you to carry heavy weights, on each end. You could carry more than a man normally could like that. So he's saying, take on the Christian yoke, the responsibility of being a Christian, and that will refresh you. But sometimes our brothers say, well, I don't feel refreshed by doing some of those things. And you know why that is? It's quite simply because the yoke isn't adjusted properly. And you know what ends up happening is, rather than carrying it like it's supposed to be, we'll flip it around and try to carry it on one shoulder, and then you got all the weight on one side, and it's a little wonder why we can't carry it. Because it was never meant to be done that way. So brothers, if you find at times something of the Christian routine is not refreshing to you, then it means it's not adjusted right. So please, find out why. And when you make the adjustment, it'll feel better, and the Christian routine will refresh us and make us happy, because it'll prove that we humbly accept Jehovah's direction, that we're patiently waiting for his deliverance, and that we trust him completely and want to do things his way. That, my brothers, is an anxiety killer. It helps us to throw all of our anxiety upon Jehovah, and it will help you to be refreshed. So it's been a very fine week. We've enjoyed very much sharing in the field ministry with you. We've enjoyed your hospitality, and we're very grateful for that. So please accept our thanks for it. And just so that you know, we're going on to the Melita congregation, so I will indeed take your love and greetings on to them. So at this point, what we'd like to do, we're going to have a field service arrangement at 15 after 12. So do you normally meet in the back room so we can meet there, those who are going out in the field ministry? But before we do that, of course, what we'd like to do is stand and sing a song together to really bring our week to a close. Song number 202 really reflects the spirit of this week, because this should be how we feel. that we're dedicated to God. So please stand as we sing Song 202 together, and then we'll close the meeting with prayer.